Hey everyone, it's Stellar Nan. Happy Star Wars Day, and may the 4th be with you. Today, we're going to be sewing some BB-8 Disney ears. Wow, I love robots! BB-8 is so cute! So I made these ears to wear during Run Disney's Star Wars Rival Run weekend. And Run Disney is a series of races where you can run through the actual Disney parks. Something to note is that at the Disney parks, there is a strict dress code, even for the park guests. Any sort of costume is not allowed unless you're 13 years old or younger. However, there are 2 exceptions: Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party and, to some extent, the Run Disney races. Being no stranger to cosplay, I was definitely excited to dress up for the occasion. I had really wanted to get back into sewing and dressing up, so this was a good opportunity to make something fun to wear, even if it was just a headpiece. For me, the most magical thing about participating in a Run Disney race was running among other festively dressed Star Wars fans while enjoying the soundtrack blasting through the outdoor speakers. I really loved seeing all the creativity the other runners showed in their costumes. It was really inspiring. It was a really immersive experience. I felt like I and the other runners around me were like a large unit of TIE fighters whenever the main theme or attack music cycled through. And I felt my heart swell when the theme of love played powerfully. Basically, it cannot be overstated that John Williams is a genius. These BB-8 ears don't necessarily have to be worn in a Run Disney race, but I purposely made them durable enough to stay put on my head even if I ran at my top speed. But I personally recommend against running with the intent to get a new personal best record, and I find it's more enjoyable as a casual experience. You can even walk and meet other Star Wars characters along the route. Now, let's get crafting. For this craft, you'll need these materials: the printed pattern and reference pieces that you can find in the description box below, a headband, white fabric for 4 pieces, 2 pieces of 1/2-inch upholstery foam, fabric paint. You'll need orange, black, white, and gray paint. Or you could just mix a few drops of black paint into white paint in a separate container or area, like I will. Optionally, you can use glitter paint and glow-in-the-dark paint. You'll also need a small paintbrush or 2 and a cup of water for them. You'll need either a sewing needle or access to a sewing machine, white and black thread, sewing pins, and sewing measuring tape. Your choice of one or a combination of a pencil, pen, chalk, or a disappearing ink pen for marking your fabric. A tiny amount of craft foam in the following colors: gray foam, white foam, and lastly, blue foam. As you can see, I opted for blue glitter foam, but regular blue foam is fine as well. An X-Acto knife, scissors or rotary cutter, E6000 glue, and super glue. For the center bow, you'll need 4 pieces of black fabric, 2 pieces of at least the same size of interfacing as well, if you'd like a more stiff and upright bow, black ribbon, and 2 pieces of black ribbon or bias tape that are about 1 inch longer than your headband that you're using. I personally use 2 pieces of 16-inch and 1/4 of an inch wide bias tape. Let's get started. First, cut out the pattern pieces from the first page. Set the foam pattern aside for later and grab the fabric pattern. Iron your white fabric flat and trace the pattern piece onto the white fabric. Cut out all 4 pieces. Using sewing pins, take 2 pieces of the white fabric and pin them together. Adding a few pins will ensure your fabric stays put and doesn't shift around while you're sewing. It's time to get sewing. Sew a 1/4 inch seam around the white fabric with white thread, starting and ending at the 2 thick black lines on the pattern piece. Be sure to leave the bottom open. This is important because we still need to insert the foam as stuffing in a later step. After you finish sewing, you'll need to cut some notches. When sewing convex curves, it creates more fabric in the seam allowance than the actual seam line. Even ironing it flat will not make it entirely smooth. So, how do you fix this? By notching it. Notches are small triangles snipped out of the fabric that are close to, but not past, the seam. Add notches around the seam of the fabric, but stop where the stitching stops on both ends. Now it's ready for you to flip the fabric inside out. Don't forget to repeat the steps needed to assemble the second ear. Iron the fabric flat and then carefully mark a line that's 1/4 of an inch from the bottom. This is where a seam will go in a later step. Adding this mark will help serve as a point of reference for how far the paint should extend to until it reaches the seam. Anything beyond the seam will be covered, so just keep that in mind while you're painting. It's almost time to paint, but first I'll go over the painting guide I made. On pages 2, 3, and 4 you can find a painting reference image and the painting templates. Page 2 depicts the finished, fully colored design. This is meant to be used as a reference guide and can be set aside where you can occasionally glance at it as you paint. Pages 3 and 4 have duplicates of the left and right ear designs. As you can see, each piece is either showing the orange or dark gray and black sections. To use these templates, cut out the corresponding areas with an X-Acto knife. Place the template over the ear fabric and transfer the designs over with a pencil or tool of your choice. Once the design has fully transferred over to the fabric, let's get painting. The main reason I opted for glow-in-the-dark paint was because the Run Disney race I ran was supposed to take place at around 5:30 a.m., while it was still relatively dark out. However, due to an electrical storm in the area, it got pushed back to 7 a.m. So at 7 a.m., it was bright enough for the ears to not have any effect. But at least I was prepared. Wow, so cute! I love BB-8. If you'd like to add just an extra bit of sparkle, I recommend using a few coats of some fabric glitter paint. I chose to coat all the gray, black, and the white gleam in its eye with a generous amount of glitter paint. Okay, for another extra special touch, I chose to add some glow-in-the-dark fabric paint all over the white parts of the ears to really make these ears pop. In my experience, glow-in-the-dark paint usually needs 3 or 4 or even more coats of paint. If you're patient enough to go the extra mile, the effect can be really neat. And painting complete. Let's continue. Trace the foam pattern piece from page 1 onto the foam twice. Then cut it out. Carefully trim away the edges on both sides of each of the pieces of foam. Rounding them out will help soften the shape. Go all the way around, except be sure to avoid trimming away the edges at the bottom curve of the pieces. Double check that the paint is completely dry before continuing. You don't want to smudge the paint accidentally. Take the foam and carefully insert each piece into the fabric ear covers. Now the ears have poofy and flexible padding. Wow, so squishy! Back to sewing. Push the foam pieces further up into the ear covers to keep from accidentally sewing over them. This can be adjusted afterwards. Carefully add a few pins at the opening of the ear covers to help keep the fabric from shifting and to help prevent sewing on the foam. Sew a 1/4 of an inch seam at the bottom of your ears to seal them shut with white thread. Use an iron to press the seams open. As for spacing and putting the ears on the headband, with chalk, mark a line at the top center point. From that point, use measuring tape to help mark 2 more lines on either side, each 1 1/8 of an inch away from the center point. These 2 lines are where the ends of each of the ears should go. Spread some E6000 glue on either side of the inner side of the seam. Carefully stick the ear onto the headband at the chalk line, making sure it's centered. Repeat these steps to add the second ear. To hide the ear cover seams, add 2 strips of 1/4 of an inch ribbon or bias tape. Each strip should hang along each edge of the headband and not down the center. Carefully use a tiny amount of glue at a time for the strip and start at about 3/4 of an inch from the end of the inside of the headband. Continue gluing down the strip around the entire headband, ending about 3/4 of an inch from the inside of the opposite end. Repeat these steps a second time to cover the seams on the other side. Onto the craft foam. Cut out the pattern pieces. Trace the 2 antenna pieces onto the white foam, the robot arm onto the gray foam, and the blue flame onto the blue foam. Then cut them out. Don't forget to add a tiny bit of black paint and optionally glow-in-the-dark paint to the antenna. Super glue the blue flame onto the robotic arm. Add some fabric glitter paint to the robotic arm too, if you'd like. Using the printed reference as a guide for where to place them, super glue the foam pieces to the ears. All that's left now is the bow. You can keep your Mickey ears as is, but if you want a little bit more of a feminine touch, let's keep going. Cut out the bow pattern. Iron the black fabric and trace the pattern piece onto it 4 times with chalk. Trace it twice onto a piece of interfacing as well. Cut out all of the pieces. Use a few pins to hold the 3 layers together, with the 2 pieces of black fabric on the bottom and the 1 piece of interfacing on top. Sew each of the 2 longer sides closed with black thread and 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Trim away the excess interfacing by cutting it away close to the seam line. This will help the seam lay flatter. Flip the bow inside out and iron it flat. Fold both bow pieces in half so that all of the open ends are layered on top of each other. Then pin them all together. Afterwards, sew the pieces together. Next up is making the center part of the bow. Grab the small piece of ribbon left over from the materials. Fold the length of the ribbon in half, with the wrong sides that aren't as shiny facing outward, if applicable. Use a pin to keep it from shifting around,
and sew the ends together with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Turn the ribbon right side out and push the bow through. And for the last step, glue the bow onto the headband where the center ribbon meets the headband with some super glue.
Star Wars has always had a special place in my heart, so it was really fun to run in a Run Disney Star Wars race with my own creation. Hopefully, you'll consider participating in a Star Wars race like this too. You know, there's been a lot of amazing Star Wars shows coming out on Disney Plus. What are you looking forward to the most? Personally, I can't wait to see The Bad Batch and the live-action Ahsoka series. Thank you for watching my video. If you enjoyed it and want to support me, join the Stellar Fam by subscribing to my channel. Stay stellar!